Thanks, Pat. That was a really good speech. I'd like to introduce Amy Miller. She's with the ACLU, correct?
Correct.
Did I get that right? I turn those letters around. I like to say UCLA sometimes. It's a little dyslexia.
Not that good at basketball.
And you'll be talking about rights of protesters, free speech messengers on legalization, correct? Excellent.
The ACLU, as you may or may not know, is a nonprofit organization that works solely on protecting our rights under the Constitution. And your right to free speech under the First Amendment means pretty much anything you want to say about legalization of marijuana is 100% legal. That doesn't mean it's not controversial. It doesn't mean that you're not going to occasionally run into people who are trying to block your rights. But the ACLU is a nonprofit organization that provides free legal representation for people whose free speech rights have been violated. I want to give a couple examples so that you can crystallize in your mind, no, really, I have the free speech rights to talk about this issue or any other political issue that I want to. You have the right to stand on a public sidewalk and communicate your message in whatever method you feel. You could wear a signboard, you could wear a t-shirt, you could be holding a sign, you could be handing out brochures. You could wear a t-shirt that had the F word on it. You could hold a sign that had the F word on it. You have the right to walk on a sidewalk talking about a political issue, even with the strongest of language, and no one can stop you. Public sidewalks belong to all of us. The one rule on a sidewalk is you can't set up camp. This is why the Occupy movement ultimately was able to be driven out of our public parks and out of many public arenas, because they'd set up structures. They had tents, they had chairs. The public sidewalk is for everybody to use, so if you wanted to bring a table with normal information, they can stop you, because now you're in the way and you're blocking other people's ability to use the sidewalk. You've got a giant signboard and a whole bunch of brochures that you're handing out and you're just a moving target, that's going to be okay. That doesn't mean, though, that I haven't had problems where people have called me. In Scotts Bluff, a marijuana legalization activist was holding a protest along the sidewalk. They were waving signs at oncoming traffic. And apparently a Scotts Bluff County deputy came up and said, "This is too controversial. You can do this, but you have to move away from the main street. Step into the park. You can't be out here where the people are, where your message is going to get across." So they called us, and on the fly I was able to call the cell phone for the officer and explain that actually, no, you have the right to stand on a public sidewalk with your message. They probably only targeted those people because the message was controversial. So every time they push, you've got to know where your rights are so you can push back. Now, in the same way as when you're dealing with police, if you're dealing with cops who've pulled you over at a traffic stop, you know and I know that if you push in an aggressive, hostile, or discourteous manner, the situation will change. So if you are engaged in free speech activities and someone tries to tell you you don't have a right to do this, I am suggesting that you don't fall into fighting stance and immediately start talking about the First Amendment, but rather ask a couple of questions. Can I get your badge number, or who was it that sent you out? And then make a call. Call us or call another attorney, and we will be able to take care of the situation. In the case of the Scotts Bluff, I think the protest was shut down for about 15-20 minutes before we were able to get it back up and running. Compare and contrast if you're wanting to do something that does involve structures. Diana in Lincoln a couple years ago wanted to have, on April 20th, a celebration of one of the Lincoln parks. She wanted to have face painting, they were going to have booths, they were going to talk about marijuana legalization, talk about the issues, and she asked for a permit. That's because the parks are available to all of us to use, but if you want to start setting up things, you want to have a sound system, you just have to ask permission ahead of time. Because what if someone had scheduled their wedding there, or someone has already scheduled their kids' family reunion there? So she contacted the city parks department in Lincoln, and the parks department said, "What is the issue?" "Okay, yeah, you can have your permit, but you're going to have to post $1 million bond." Now, the Lincoln ordinance at that point said that the Parks and Rec department could pick and choose who had to post a bond. Right, she didn't have to post $1 million. She had to go find an insurance agent who was willing to write out a temporary one-day insurance permit for up to $1 million. You know, just in case they blew up the park. I don't know what the city of Lincoln thought was going to happen, but the ordinance allowed the Parks and Rec people to pick and choose. Apparently, when the Boy Scouts were having their meeting, they did not have to post a bond. When the local church group was having their meeting, they didn't have to post a bond. In fact, according to their records, Diana and the marijuana legalization group were the only group that had been asked to post a $1 million bond. Now, that's illegal, and there was a second part that was illegal. Once I say to the Parks Department, my pockets are empty, I don't have the ability to post a $1 million bond, and even though they had the bad problem of we pick and choose who's going to post it, there should have been a provision for people who don't have any money. There should have been a waiver for indigent groups. As a grassroots movement that had no key people involved, there was no national organization that was paying the bills, it was a situation where Diana had no money. And free speech wasn't free. They wanted her to be able to post the $1 million bond even after she was able to prove we don't have any funding. It did take a lawsuit, but it took 2 years of fighting before we got the city of Lincoln to back down and change their policy. Now, Diana ended up holding her protest without the booths, without the face painting. She ended up taking it to the sidewalk. And one of the favorite pictures I have on my computer is a picture of Diana with a sort of large 5-foot flag on a 3-foot pole standing in front of the Nebraska State Supreme Court building, waving that flag, which she could do on the sidewalk. So she still did get her message across. She did not get arrested, so everybody was safe. And in the end, the city of Lincoln agreed to change the law. It took a 2-year battle. Court battles aren't quick, and that's one reason why we try to encourage people, let us try to negotiate these issues. And if we can resolve it without a court battle, that's great. If we have to go to court, we will. We did for Frank Schumacher, who applied for the license plate, NE420. And I'm not going to lie, when Frank first called my office, I didn't know what the problem was with the license plate because I didn't know what it stood for. But the student college volunteers in the office knew, and they were able to explain to me why the DMV had said no, he can't have his personalized license plate. They said it was a drug message. Frank said, yeah, I know. I want to put it on my car, which is covered with slogans and bumper stickers, and I want to convey my message about marijuana legalization. The Nebraska Department of Motor Vehicles said no, because they didn't like the message. That's illegal. We tried to negotiate. They said, sue us, so we did. We sued and said, your free speech rights, even if it's something that's controversial, even if it's currently still a minority opinion, is protected. No, he didn't have something obscene. No, he didn't have something threatening. There are a few categories that are protected, but political speech is protected. We filed the lawsuit about 4 o'clock on a Thursday. And by 10 a.m. on Friday, they'd already keeled over and said, here's your license plate. One of the national magazines who called me, the reporter ended up printing a story in a magazine for lawyers saying it was the fastest settlement ever. Apparently, the state didn't think that we would fight them. And that's the problem. A lot of times, if you get shoved by the state, or the county sheriff, or the Parks and Recreation Department, if you don't know what your rights are, or you don't know who to call, when they shove, a lot of times people just sit down and shut up and go home. Knowing that the ACLU is there to help, knowing that the First Amendment is a powerful tool, means that there is very little that you can do. If you sat here all day and threw hypotheticals at me, could I hand out brochures about medical marijuana on a public sidewalk in front of a K through 12 elementary school? Yes. Could I wear a t-shirt that said, fuck this, I want to legalize it today? Yes. Could I wear that into Walmart? Walmart's not the government. We're protected by the First Amendment against the government. You're still stuck with what your private employer wants to do if they want to drug test people. You're still stuck with maybe Village Inn will let you come in and sit. The government, police, cannot stop your free speech rights, and you should feel free to use this as a resource. If you have questions, I'm happy to take them. Question?
With the issue of pot being a crime in any sort of reason at all, for it to be criminal, correct, you would have to hurt somebody. And if for it to be a civil, it would have to have some issue to deal with money. If I'm walking down the street, I'm not selling marijuana. Let's say I've grown it myself, whatever, but I've acquired this marijuana. No money involved. That would make it not civil. How is this a crime in any way, shape, or form? And why is it not legal for me to walk down the street or whatever?
ACLU agrees with you 100%. We take the full libertarian line on this. The consenting adults should be able to buy what they want, whether we're talking about sexually related materials, whether you're talking about materials that are drugs or alcohol. adults should be able to make these choices on their own. So the ACLU agrees with you that it's ludicrous to allow the government to pick and choose this substance is legal, this one's not. That argument probably isn't going to work in a court of law yet, but I think that's one of those many public policy arguments, right? It's when you're talking to people and you're trying to change hearts and minds, a judge is just going to roll her eyes and say, well, the good voters decided to elect legislators and those legislators made it illegal. Next.
Well,
So you got to go back to the people and explain to them why it's so
I was
stupid.
going to say, because the government should be a tool to make better conclusions and stuff like this, but we still have yet a law system that absolutely makes no sense at all.
That's why it's especially offensive, right? The 17 states that have passed it, as my understanding is, have all been by ballot initiative. It was the people that did it because they could not get the lawmakers to do it. And that's why it's even more offensive if a group is trying to get something on the ballot, if you're trying to hold an event, or you're trying to distribute material, or you're trying to just explain your position to people, and to have the government in your face trying to stop that. That's where your free speech rights are so important in this fight, because if they silence your free speech rights, you're not going to get the message to the people who ultimately are going to be the voters who pass it. And so that's why, especially on this issue, we have to be very vigilant. And if someone tries to take your free speech rights, make sure that we're protecting everyone. I had some people, I saw letters to the editor, and some people sent snarky emails to my office like, really? You guys are wasting federal lawsuit on a license plate? Really? Like, it's one license plate. But it's on a car that's on a political campaign for an issue that is a major political issue right now. So yes, I'm going to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars to litigate over this license plate if I need to, because it's the tip of them silencing and shutting down the entire movement. So making sure that you know I have the right to wear the button, I have the right to wear the t-shirt, I have the right to have the bumper stickers, and I have the right to communicate on this issue. Each time then if they try to get in your face and try to stop you, again, don't go in fighting mode and start taking blows. Say, can we get your badge number? Okay. ACLU. And call in for help. Call in for the reinforcements. Yeah.
So what if you see people getting targeted on the interstate all the time, getting their cars searched for whatever reason? Like I feel like I wouldn't be as willing to put, marijuana stickers on my car because I'd be afraid that law enforcement are going to target me and they're going to pull me over just because of the sticker. And then what do you do in those cases if they don't have probable cause but they think they do because you have a sticker on your car? Do you have any recourse that you can...
Yeah, this is a good one. We are going to be doing a separate session on police,
Yep.
but to at least answer the free speech question, it's illegal for them to pull someone over based on the fact that the cop doesn't like a message on their bumper sticker. So if it's, I've got abolish the death penalty on my car, maybe you've got bad cop, no donut, and that pisses off the officer on the beat, and you've got legalize it. It would be illegal for the cop to pull any of us over. Or you've got a Romney sticker and the cop is a devout Democrat.
I don't have a Romney sticker.
Sure you don't.
So he says, it would be illegal for an officer to pull any of us over for any of those messages. But it's also illegal for them to racially profile. And we know, looking at the racial profiling that's been happening in Nebraska, if you are a person of color, you're twice as likely to be pulled over. In Omaha and Lincoln, it gets to numbers like 16 times as more likely in rural Nebraska. So that's illegal, but they're still doing it. This is an example of, it would be wrong for that to happen. Bad guys sometimes do the wrong thing, though. So that leaves it, unfortunately, up to every activist to have to go through that mental assessment of, so do I put the sticker on and run the risk of running into a cop who's a bad cop? And yes, you could fight about it in court later and say, I really believe he pulled me over because he didn't like my bumper sticker. If in the meantime they found something in your car that shouldn't be there, it may not be worth it to you to have that bumper sticker on. And that is that sad reality. I compare this sort of thing to everyone is supposed to stop at the stop sign. But the day that you stop relying on the other person to stop at the stop sign and you don't look is going to be the day you're going to be T-boned by someone who's doing something they shouldn't be doing. And that is terrible, but you're the one carrying the injuries now. So technically, you have a 100% God-given right to have that on your bumper, and no officer in the land is supposed to stop you for it. Real world, we all know that that becomes a higher risk for us. Yes?
And not to be critical in anyone's ideas or anything, but I noticed that you're bringing up constitutional rights constantly. And from my understanding, the word constitution and where it came from, this is all brought about by, I believe the word is constituent, the person that actually brought slaves from other lands. And then they had a constitution over that person, which is stressing, which I feel personally, that this is nothing more than labeling me as a slave under this law, which I'm more than absolutely sure that there's other ways around it.
That's interesting. You've blown me out of the water in terms of scholarship, so I can't even answer on that. It is interesting.
Sorry.
Since the ACLU only works on constitutional issues, I view it as the biggest protection for each of us as individuals, because the Constitution protects the one against everybody else. So the one person who's an atheist is protected against all the Christians who want to teach that person Christianity in school. The one person who is gay has the right not to be told that their choice and their life is wrong or immoral. So for me, the Constitution's the most mighty shield that we have against the government, but not knowing that historical background.
We'll talk about it afterwards.
Yeah. Anything else before you switch to your next presentation? Have you run into problems distributing material or?
Actually, no. I haven't run any problems like that. Of course, I am very familiar with the Constitution, and as to what you said earlier, the Constitution, don't get tied up in the name, because the Constitution is a contract between us and the government, restricting the government, not us. So that's where those constitutional rights come about.
I've been doing my little bit of fair share of studying,
Yeah.
and I've dug pretty deep, and well, not even that deep yet, and I've found a few neat tricks, but I will stress that my explanation of the Constitution is absolutely true, and it's merely here to enslave.
We'll discuss that later.
I'll leave, then the only other question that I think I had come up when I came to NORML's meeting last year, the issue does sometimes arise when you want to express yourself and it is someone else's party. So let's say it's a public park and the Omaha Gay Pride Festival is going on. And so anyone can come and go, it's a street festival, there's no admission, there's no age limit, and you wander in and you've got some petitions where you're asking people to go ahead and sign to legalize marijuana to get it on the ballot. If Omaha Pride says, hello, we're here to be gay, we don't want to talk about your issue, they can totally boot you. Because they, just like Diana wanted to reserve that portion of the park for her event, they've reserved that. So the only time when your rights are going to be, that you can be booted out off of a public park, off of a public sidewalk, is if it's one of those temporary things that belongs to someone else. I understand, especially in Omaha, the River City Jazz Festival has booted several different progressive causes that were trying either to do leafleting or try to do petition circulating. When it's a temporary thing like that, someone else does own the public sidewalk. But the good news is, if you hold an event and you've reserved an area, if a bunch of right-wing puritanical people that are against you want to come and say, hey, it's a public park, we want to come mess up your festival, you can boot them for that day too, because then it belongs to you for the period that you reserved it. So that's the only other issue that I could think of that came up in the last meeting I was with you all.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, the next thing we're going to do is go back to the theater room. We're going to watch 10 Rules for Dealing with Police. This will cover, it's a very informative documentary. It was done by a lawyer who was a judge who, well, he did this documentary. I think you'll all enjoy it.